contrary to popular opinion, drug addiction happens to everybody.
You're like a walking zombie when you're on coke.
I started using it to just stay awake. Then I started using it to stay with the party.
You want to try this? Yeah, okay, sure, I'll try anything once.
And then after a while, it was, what difference does it make, you know? And so I started to use crack. But I think it was probably because a lot of my friends used it. At the time I was using, I didn't have a whole lot going for me. I really didn't have nothing to lose.
I have seen friends of mine that now live on the streets that lived a fairly so-called normal life, I guess. They had a home, they had food, they had all those kind of stuff. And I find them on the streets.
Originally in the 80s, I mean, coke was the designer drug of choice. I think that everyone, oh, you've got some blow, let's, great, let's feel good for 20 minutes. People didn't realize the hazards, or didn't want to look at the hazards.
For myself, when I was using, there was a definite change. My whole world revolved around the drug. It didn't matter about anything else. It was getting cocaine. Didn't matter what needed to be paid. Didn't matter what I was doing to myself. It didn't matter how I felt. It was just getting coke.
It was a vicious cycle for me when I was doing a lot of coke. I wasn't with anyone at that time, and I used the excuse of, well, I had split up with a significant other that led me to the coke use. It's all bullshit, really.
It causes all kinds of problems, usually because one person wants to do it more than the other, or is addicted sooner, or they're both addicts and trying to figure out how to dodge everybody they owe money.
The whole world revolves around cocaine. The fact of trying to maintain a relationship while stuck in that addiction is almost impossible.
I can't remember exactly how I got to that point. I just remember thinking that I was waking up in the morning and there was somebody trying to wake me up in bed. The reality was I was in the ditch in front of a friend's home.
Just about everybody who gets into it heavy ends up doing a circle of life is good, life is great, life is not so good, life is bad, life is really bad.
You are using, you don't want to eat, and when you do eat, everything tastes like sawdust.
When I looked in the mirror, I looked like I was sick. My face was sunken in. I had lost about 50 pounds in a matter of 3 months.
I thought nothing of selling just about everything I owned, dropping anywhere from $500 to $1,000 a day on coke use.
For the most part, when people do coke, they become so focused on the drug itself that everything else around them is irrelevant. You could walk up and slap them in the face and they probably wouldn't care as long as they've got a line to do right afterwards.
I pretty much had nothing. I sold everything I had, short of a few bits of clothing. Basically sold my soul.
And in the drug community, when you're around other drug addicts and you OD, everybody scatters like cockroaches. Nobody's going to try to save your life.
For me, it was looking in the mirror and going, oh my God, who is that? I don't even know who's looking back at me.
What used to be a human being is now just the shell of a person with no emotion, walking around solely focused on getting high and doing whatever it takes to get high. I think one of the major barriers presented to those that want to quit would be identity. Because usually people are wrapped up in this lifestyle so long they don't know nothing else, and there's and when you have a desire to change and start to change, you almost feel as though you're not being real to yourself, like you're trying to be somebody who you're not.
When you're in the addiction, it is so normal. It is so normal for you to be there because you surround yourself with people that it's acceptable by.
It's like anything else. If all your friends drink, you're gonna drink, and if you don't drink, then you got no friends. And you say, like, okay, what? You're not doing it anymore? Well, we don't want to hang out with you because you remind us of what's wrong with us. And so you end up being very lonely, at least initially.
Even drug addicts and street people are good people. If anybody ever took the time to sit down and talk or learn or be a friend to people like that, they'd understand that they're no different than Joe Blow who works at Walmart.
Nobody starts out with the idea of being an addict.
Meth users are tweaky, unpredictable, thieves, lowlives.
They're junkies. They're no good.
A part of that is true, but a part of that is an overlooking that they're human beings and they're doing that for a reason.
I think it's really easy to dismiss a drug user as, as nothing. When you're getting high, it's not just party time. It's about changing how you feel significantly because you need to, on some level. The drug user is just another guy trying to make it through life. And if you don't recognize that, you can just end up dismissing the guy as, oh, he's a loser. He's a drug addict. He's nobody. Well, he's somewhere along the line, he's somebody's kid.
Like, all my friends, including myself, lost a lot of weight. I lost maybe 20 pounds. Some of my friends lost like 50, 60 pounds. And not like healthy weight, like skin and bones, your face starts to cave in.
When you do meth, you very quickly get into a position where you're using daily, and you're not sleeping, you're not eating properly, and your body just doesn't process what you do eat.
I gotta go to the doctor. I wanna get my stuff figured out. My health. A lot of brain loss. It's like I can't think for a long time. I'll carry a good conversation on, but then it's like come brain dead after a while.
Like I said, like we sold everything and you're left sitting in a room with, a $5 table made out of plywood and a couple of cushions on the floor just so that you can buy a gram that night.
We worked in this nightclub section, and we would do speed all the time, and we never knew what we were doing half the time.
A couple friends of mine called a pizza place and ordered 4 pizzas to an abandoned house down the street. And they waited behind the house and they took a bat and they rolled the pizza guy so that they could get money to buy a gram and get high. That kind of thing, it becomes more and more common the more you use.
For myself, I think the thing that always sticks in my mind more than anything else is being 5'10", weighing 135 pounds, and in my mind, I was fat. And I was 135 pounds because I've been doing speed every day for months, and I was skin and bone, realistically. I've seen pictures of myself from back then, and I was really skinny. But yet, in my head, I was fat, and there was just no way around that. And that was just the kind of mindset you get into when you're using amphetamines. You can't see reality.
It just changes your priorities. You don't care about food, you don't care about rent, you don't care about your furniture, your possessions. All you care about is that fix and when you're gonna get that fix.
But I have lost a lot more than I've gained.
The whole scene was really hard. Seeing your friends do that, seeing yourself do that, doing things you said you'd never do, and becoming somebody you never wanted to be, just so that you can fit in and just so that you can get that high and escape from who you are now and what you've done now.
I've known people to lose their houses, their vehicles, their kids.
When I was using meth heavily, and that's when I was about 19, I had relationships that I had one particular relationship that was a mess, and we were both using every kind of drug we could get a hold of, but a lot of amphetamines, and we're constantly fighting, constantly suspicious of each other, and getting depressed, and there was never a time when we both felt good.
And he did it behind her back for a long time. And then she found out and she was really mad at him for a couple months. And Then she slowly started accepting it, and then she got into it. And then they'd both be burning out at the same time, and they'd both get really angry at the same time. And they got into lots and lots of fights. And it basically ruined their relationship, which was fine for 5 years previous.
When I was using meth, I was constantly feeling like people were talking about me, plotting against me.
When you do meth, you're on a high. You feel great for so long that when you come down, it's almost like there's no happiness left in you, and all there is left is depression and anger.
A lot of the people I used drugs with were bikers, and violence was just part of their day-to-day life. When you use meth, the experience of meth makes you feel like you're being threatened, makes you feel like people are talking about you, makes you feel like something's going to happen. And so you're looking around for what the threat is. And when you can't find it, you make it up. So the people around you end up being the enemy, end up being people that are out to get you. So violence just stems from that very, very quickly.
You know, I've had buddies sit there and say, hey man, I think you're gonna die, I'm gonna take off. And I laid in my living room for 9 hours staring at the ceiling. And, you know, nobody was there to help me. I was too beyond high to help myself.
When it's happening in that moment, I know that I felt awful. I know that I was horrified by it. I know that I was scared. Yet, a week later, sitting with a bunch of friends, talking about it, I'm talking about it like it was a good time. Now, how does that happen?
It's really tough to get away from that, you know? When you get into doing drugs, the people you hang out with are all drug addicts, and your old friends don't want to hang out with you anymore because you're all tweaking, and they don't want to be around that scene. So the only people you have left are the drug addicts, and it's hard to turn your back on everybody you know and say, I don't want to be like you, you know?
The worst part is dealing with stuff like it's 9 o'clock at night and you're sitting in your apartment by yourself listening to the tap drip, you know, and you got nothing else to do because you pawned your TV 6 months ago to buy some meth, and you know, nobody wants to be around you because all your friends are using, and they, you know, and it's not that they don't want to be around you because you're not using. A lot of them don't want to be around you because they don't want you to start again.
Well, it's been really good for me to get away from that. I think that although I lost a lot of my friends, I gained even more. Being clean and being myself.
I had my first beer, well, official first beer when I was 11, which I got to share with my cousin.
My father is an alcoholic. My parents are divorced, and that was one of the contributing factors.
He was an alcoholic as long as I can remember, but it's a progressive disease, and he became more so as time went on. And when I was 11 years old, he saw a doctor and was diagnosed with cirrhosis of the liver, disease caused by alcoholism. The doctor told him then that he had 6 months to live if he didn't stop drinking. And he left the doctor's office and went immediately to the bar. I always felt like when he did die that he had made a decision on that day to die, just as much as someone who committed suicide.
They used to get really angry really easily. No one would know what would set them off. And I remember one time I said something to my grandpa, and I don't remember what. He was making a sandwich, and he took the jam jar and just like threw it at me, and it hit the wall behind me and shattered like everywhere. It was really scary. It had like jam dripping down my face.
When I'd get drunk, I'd end up doing things that I would really regret later. Whether it's something as stupid as trying to break into a store that's across from the police station, or, you know, just saying the wrong things to the wrong person.
I lost one girlfriend because of my drinking problem.
If you drink too much, you can't keep a job. If you can't keep a job, you don't have much money, which means you've got very little to drink with.
Well, I've seen people come up with some pretty creative ways to get alcohol. But when it comes down to buying food or buying clothing, it's always, I'm so broke, I can't do this, I don't have any money.
My parents saw themselves as being something different than your average drunk. they were a cut above the average drunk. They didn't pass out in bars, and they didn't wander the streets asking people for money, and they paid their bills every month, so they didn't have a problem. But they clearly had a problem.
My father would get very violent with my mom and us kids when he drank. And he used to drink every night.
My mom and stepdad would get drunk, and it would be, you know, happy times until the end of the night, in which the boxing gloves would come out, and you know, essentially they would beat each other up.
I know in my own experience that the only times I've regretted things that I've done has been when I'm drinking.
I remember being a kid, and my dad would come home certain nights, so we'd go out to like a family get together, and he'd get drunk. And being a kid, I found it very embarrassing and unsettling, because here's your dad. He looks like your dad, but he's not. He's acting all different.
Maybe you didn't necessarily intend for that to happen, but it happened.
She wouldn't like admit it or show it to us when my dad would frequently beat on my mom. It was hard because I had to shelter my sisters from that as well. And the real violence was I had to see it too. And it taught me a lot about alcohol and about what it can do to you.
I don't think I've ever had a drink where some type of violence didn't occur.
I do get violent, like, I don't know, I guess it's just alcohol doing that, where you feel invincible and, oh, he's only 6'5".
I've gotten so drunk to the point where I lose all self-control and all comprehension of what I'm doing. And I've, on more than one occasion, have woken up in jail, not exactly sure about why I was there, and feeling silly having to ask the guard, you know, what did I do? Because I got so wasted, I blacked out, and people got hurt, you know.
The one time I got so mad at my boyfriend that I was ready to kill him, and like, my adrenaline was going and I wanted him dead, but if I hadn't been drinking, it would have never got that far. Like, I wouldn't have been so irrational. I wouldn't have hit him. I wouldn't have tried to like hurt him at all. I would have tried to talk it out and been more like calm, but because I had drank heavily, it didn't matter to me. Like, he had hurt me, so I wanted him dead, and that seemed like it was fair at the time. That was a good thing to do.
Your thought process has changed so much that, you know, everything becomes, you know, everything becomes intensified. So your jealousy, although you may not be a jealous person, will become a whole lot more apparent if you've been drinking, because, you know, as everybody knows, when you're drinking, you sort of come out of your shell, and you would say things that you otherwise would probably have kept to yourself. And often those things are best kept to yourself, which is why you don't say them.
Everybody's had a drink. It's sort of a ritual of our growing up. Everybody's got to get drunk once, and everybody's got to do the hangover and the throwing up and the experience, and it's just part of our culture, and everyone accepts that.
It's a barrier of like not wanting to go back to your reality of your world. Not wanting to look at yourself and see that you've hit rock bottom.
Having the benefit of remembering how I felt looking at my father drunk, and after my parents' divorce, my father entered AA. I think having that experience allowed me to potentially dodge the bullet. I mean, I'm much more responsible when I use alcohol now because of remembering my dad.
It's almost as though I knew I had a problem when every time I would wake up from being drunk, I would have to make a series of phone calls apologizing for my actions. Then I would think, you know, maybe what I'm doing isn't such a good idea. I mean, it seemed that every time I would get drunk and I would wake up, I would have to explain myself and apologize, and, you know, and it was just not, you know, it wasn't very, very healthy living.
Instead of like, oh, hey, buddy, hey man, you were a real asshole last night.
If you've been drinking your whole life and you're dependent on it and you don't see it as a problem, then no matter how many times other people go, you've had enough to drink, then you don't really see it as a problem.
I think the real problem is finding alternatives. What do I do with my Friday night? What do I do with my time that I'm not drinking? And part of it is being able to fill that gap, and unfortunately, that's not a very easy thing to do.
Alcohol is like everywhere.
I think there's still a lot of I just drink alcohol, but I'd never do drugs, as though there's some kind of a difference. In my opinion, there isn't a difference. It's one's legal. But they have the same effect in that they emotionally remove you from life and from the people in your life.
Even when we talk about it, drugs and alcohol, right? We separate alcohol out. Why is that? I think it's because so many people that are in positions of power, politically, economically, use alcohol. So they don't want to look at it as a potential problem. So we separate it out. It's another drug. Just, there's no difference between alcohol and cocaine and heroin as far as the potential for problems. In fact, alcohol probably has a greater potential for problems because it's so accepted in our society.
People just assume that drugs are only something that poor people do. And I think that, and it's the same thing, with alcohol as well. Only poor people become alcoholics and street people, whereas a rich businessman who drinks scotch every day is not considered an alcoholic or to have an alcohol problem. But, when he goes home at night, I'm sure that, he experiences the same problems as anybody else on the street.
Well, I'm sure that you can hear "Don't Do It" anytime you want.
You're gonna hear "Don't do it" every 5 seconds of every day, so I'm not gonna say that.
I don't want to say to people, don't do it, because nobody listens if you say don't do it. But if you're going to do it, be safe. Make sure that you have somebody around that can look after you and will tell you the truth.
Think ahead, plan ahead. And if you're gonna drink, have someone that will be sober watching.
I think everybody will experiment and, don't necessarily never have a drink, but think about it, think about other things. Think about what you're gonna lose.
If you want to try it, but keep your mind open and remember that anything is okay in moderation. Moderation being the key. But as long as you don't start, you'll never have to quit.
Once that poison's in you, man, it's hard to get it out of you. And just, if you got the chance, just double think of what you're gonna do, man, because it's a killer in the long run for you.
If you really felt a curious need to research, to talk, to ask people who have, because as fun as aspects may be of it, the pitfalls are incredibly huge.
Good luck.